Good afternoon, everyone. Let me just first of all say I sure wish I was there in Rome with you. It is the early morning here in Wisconsin in the United States. I am Cathy Lins, and I am the founder of Gather My Lost Sheep, a trauma-informed initiative in the United States. I'm going to be focusing on adult clergy abuse, and today I want to talk about the gap in safeguarding, but it's not a gap in intention, it's a gap in the evaluative framework that we're using. And the gap is this: when an adult reports abuse by a member of the clergy, we ask the wrong question. Dr. David Pooler at Baylor University has conducted the most comprehensive national study of adults who have experienced sexual abuse by clergy. 39% screen positive for PTSD. That's higher than among combat veterans. Fewer than 10% reported to their church. And of those who did, not one reported an overall positive response. Not one. These are not the outcomes of consensual relationships. They're the outcomes of abuse. And yet the institutional response consistently frames these situations as affairs. Dr. Pooler's essay is entitled, "It's Not an Affair, It is Abuse." Dr. Pooler found that 62% of those harmed were in a counseling or spiritual direction relationship when the abuse began. A 2022 European study confirms the same. Approximately 3/4 of all clergy abuse cases begin in pastoral care. Dr. Peter Malinowski said, quote, "The abuser takes the place of God, speaks with the voice of God. This leads to a loss of spiritual freedom," end quote. Consent frameworks were not designed for this relationship. Current safeguarding asks, did the adult consent? Dr. Pooler is direct. There is no other helping profession that views sexual interactions in the way we allow ministers to get away with. And from Dr. Malinowski, the consulting adults framing fails to appreciate the uneven power dynamics. The question fails because the framework does not account for the power structure of the relationship they're actually in. St. John Paul II identified human formation as the foundation of all priestly formation. When that foundation is incomplete, what follows? Dr. Malinowski conducted psychological evaluations of seminarians for 15 years. He found that most spiritual abuse is not malice. It's unmet attachment and integrity needs. And because these leaders do not understand themselves, they cannot see the impact on anyone else. This is not a critique of the priesthood. It's the church's own formation teaching, naming what happens when that foundation is absent. The pastoral relationship becomes the place where unmet needs are filled through control. Evan Stark defines coercive control not as one behavior, rather a system operating across multiple domains over time. There we go. Sorry about that. In the pastoral relationship, 5 sources of authority operate at once: spiritual, sacramental, institutional, communal, and relational. No other helping profession concentrates this many sources of power in a single relationship. Where coercive control is present, it moves through all 5. Dependency builds, alternatives are isolated, and what looks like consent from the outside may be the person doing the only thing that has ever kept them safe. This slide shows 4 patterns by which coercive control drives the dismissal of adult clergy abuse. Let me focus on the 3rd, institutional silence as control. Non-response, delay, and narrative management extend the original coercive control pattern into the institutional response itself. Dr. Malinowski found that denial persists because acknowledging the harm would collapse the very self-image, the attachment and integrity needs the leader depends on. When safeguarding asks whether the adult consented, it encounters behaviors that look like agreement, but what it's actually encountering are survival responses. These are adaptive responses to overwhelming circumstances, not free agreement. Let me show you what this looks like for one person. She is an adult, a trauma survivor. She doesn't want to go to the priest. She wants to go to God. The priest is the only door that she knows. She brings him the most sacred thing she has ever written, her wound, given to God. He takes it and seals it inside a secret between them. It never occurs to her to think of the priest that way. When she reports it, she's told she misunderstood the relationship. That's the gap. Safeguarding asks, did she consent? It should have asked, what does consent look like for someone who believed that she was standing before God? Safeguarding is trained to look for an incident, a bruise, a single event that it can date and document. Coercive control may not leave any of that. These statements on the screen, this is what it sounds like. Undermining reality, spiritual coercion, reputation attacked. This is one version of coercive control. What matters is not any single one, it's the pattern over time. The slide makes this visual. It's the same system, opposite outcomes. This is coercive control operating at the institutional level, the same mechanism scaled up. Secular legal systems are moving ahead of church law on exactly this question. 14 states have criminalized adult clergy sexual abuse, treating clergy like therapists. With recent legislative action, that number continues to grow. Consent is not a defense where authority and dependency are present. Researchers have identified a fundamental flaw in how the church conceptualizes vulnerability. A model that locates vulnerability as a characteristic of the person rather than a situational and relational condition produced by the power dynamics of the relationship. Conditions that the 2021 canonical update does not yet recognize. The law is recognizing the power dynamic. Safeguarding must do the same. These four patterns are not culturally specific. Culture amplifies them. In some contexts, reporting a priest means being cut off from your community entirely. Silence is not a choice, it's a condition of survival. It's one pattern, it's many contexts. If the evaluative framework remains consent-based, the same dismissal will happen everywhere. Instead of asking, did the adult consent, ask, what power was present in this relationship? Was there coercive control? Was there spiritual or institutional dependency? What responses that look like consent were actually survival? We are not evaluating actions, we're evaluating conditions. If we do not recognize coercive control, we'll continue to dismiss abuse we are responsible to see. Dr. Pooler's 2025 recovery research found that the single most potent healing factor was being believed. Not therapy, not legal accountability, being believed. When we build safeguarding systems capable of seeing what has actually happened, we create the conditions for people who've been silenced for years to finally be believed. That is not a small thing. That is the beginning of what the church is called to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Cathy. Yes, across contexts and cultures, safeguarding must be improved. So any questions to Cathy from the group? No? Yes.
Hi, Cathy. It's Mark Williams. We were in the preparatory session together at North America. It's really a comment on what you said about John Paul II. And you can comment on this as far as institutional silence as control. I don't disagree with him that human formation is at the center of all formation. And yet he knew about Theodore McCarrick. And he elevated McCarrick to the Archbishop of Washington. How do you explain that when he says that human formation is at the center of all formation and institutional silence at the very top of the house?
I'm always struck by, and by the thing that we talk about here about the integrity needs and the attachment needs, how hard it is for people to see what's actually sometimes right in front of them. And that doesn't make it right, but it is the challenge that we face so often. And it's the continued conversations, I think. I have never had the chance to talk to John Paul II, but I have had a chance to talk to different bishops, different archbishops, and there's times in those conversations where they'll tell me about one situation. I mentioned this during our pre-work, where they told me, well, it's terrible what's happened to the seminarians. That's awful. And then when I said, well, then when it happens to adult women, oh, well, you know, we don't infantize women. I'm sorry, Bishop. Could you just help me out here? Help me understand how these two things are different. Now, at the time, he didn't want to talk to me anymore. We had had a wonderful conversation for an hour and a half before that, but that ended the conversation. But I do think it does matter in those moments to speak up, because I also know that the head of their review board was in contact with me about 2 months later saying, just so you know, they're doing a complete review of every adult case of women's cases we've ever had. So it matters. But that's the challenge of helping people see what they don't currently see. And that's what I hope people will take from this is too often we have abuse happening that we aren't willing to call by their right name. And if we don't call it by the right name, we will never see it.
Okay. Thank you. Any more? Okay. One more question.
Hi, thank you for that speech. It was absolutely amazing. I just sort of want your opinion on something, because we are looking at our human formation for our seminarians, and I'm lucky I live in Australia. We do have affirmative consent laws that call out power imbalance in relationship. We are thinking about the concept of support without report for those who are abused by members of clergy. Obviously, adults can then decide how they want to go about that. But I would love to know what your opinion is around support without report in the case that would mean that we know that there is a member of a clergy who is abusing adults, and although we are aware of it, we are not doing anything to stop that member of clergy while we support the seminarian or the adult survivor.
Ooh. I step back because I am a survivor myself. And I'd have a lot of questions of why and how to balance that. And how does, if it's supporting, how will we adjust and help them step through? As I think about the perpetrator in this particular case, one of the things that I'm very clear about, and I mentioned in here about Dr. Malinowski's work, where he's talking about a lot of it is attachment issues and identity issues. I think that's one end of the spectrum. I also recognize that there's the other end of the spectrum. And so I think there's the balance of where we have the majority who are needing to truly do their human formation to really work through what does this mean? What are my attachment issues that I may be not addressing yet? My identity issues that I really am trying to get managed through someone else. I recognize that part of it and that work. And what I love about Dr. Malinowski's work is he actually is actively working with individuals, clergy, as well as laity, because he looks at all this as just as much the laity's work as anyone else's, as something that we can do. But I also see the balance of how do we help the survivor understand what it is that we're doing and why we're doing it. And I know that sometimes having that direct conversation matters. I'm just going to give you an example. We had a National Eucharistic Congress. They were very highly criticized after the fact because clergy abuse wasn't addressed. So the Bishop Cousins actually led a special session after that to talk specifically about clergy abuse. And some of the Wake members who were at the conference, URNAT conference last year, helped hold a special session. As we were talking, there were survivors who were there who were like, but why won't bishops and clergy help us, the priests help us heal? Why aren't they there for us? Why? And in that moment, I just felt drawn to tell them, they can't give you what they themselves don't have. You've done this recovery work. You've looked at, as you look at your trauma and what you've experienced, you've been doing the work. You've been looking. You've been asking the questions. They haven't done that yet. They aren't there yet, and so they can't give you what they haven't really worked through themselves. And in that moment, I could look across the room and I could see literally all these light bulbs going off and people turning and saying, wow, I actually feel sorry for them. Like, they really don't get this. They really don't. I think it's really important to have that framing that's going to be important to this too, so that it's a benefit and an understanding and an opportunity to really build that kind of circle of community to understand where we're at and what can we do that helps move things forward. I hope that helps.
Okay. Any more? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Cathy, for your time with us. And
Thank you.
yeah. And we